right, welcome back, 4th and Long, to another episode. This is episode 4 of the 2019 fantasy season. What an interesting week that was, and I think so far an interesting year. I mean, I think we've all sworn numerous times at our teams, some more than others, myself included. I think I've posted a few things and said some things, and, well, I still have the same shitty team. So, moving forward, Randy, where are you at these days? What's new?
Oh, not too much new. Glad I pulled out a win this week, but my Cowboys weren't so fortunate. So gotta hope to get back to my both our teams winning ways this week, and playing against you this week too, which would be interesting to say the least.
Well, it'd be nice for me to pull out a win and gain some, get back into it. But if you pull out the win, you're just creating a further gap from everybody else in the league. So, the league's definitely getting interesting. And best of luck to you this weekend, because that's probably the nicest they'll be until Tuesday morning. So, Randy, let's just shake things up here. Let's start off with Fantasy Surprise Player of Week 4, and I'll let you kick it off.
Okay, well, my fantasy surprise is Chris Godwin, wide receiver for the Bucks, currently playing in our league. Shelly told me to. I got to see this player up close as Selby was playing against me last week. This is the kind of thing where it's probably related. We're probably going to talk to some of the other players on this Bucks team, but the last 2 weeks, haven't they just been lighting everything up like it's, and they haven't even had Fitzmagic to do it for them. Godwin stat, 172 yards, 2 touchdowns. That's amazing for any wide receiver, but if you consider the fact that he's actually their second wide receiver, Mike Evans is still their top guy, and he did this against a supposedly good Rams defense, although they didn't look very good, allowing 55 points in that one. 29.2 fantasy points, and I think something to note, even just for the entire season, his longest catch is 30 yards. So it's not like, if anyone watched that game, Mike Evans had like an 80-yard touchdown catch, was basically his only catch for a touchdown. But Godwin, usually when a wide receiver gets 150 plus yards, there's like a 60 or an 80 yarder in there that's half the chunks. But his season max is 30 yards, so he's just getting fed the ball off, and I guess he's open all the time. So, but just the fact that no one really expected him to be that good, especially playing second fiddle to Mike Evans, that's a surprise for me for this week.
Yeah, no, that's a good pick. I mean, again, like you say, who would have thought the Bucks? I mean, what's interesting about the guy you just mentioned is if you look at the last 2 games, they've played the Rams and the Giants. Now, I am a Giants fan, but even I'll admit, if you look at paper, they should destroy the Giants. He only had 40 yards against the Giants, and one was a 20-yard catch. Then you go to the Rams, which have been known for pretty decent defense over the last few years, and actually got a better defense. They made a few additions, but apparently not. He was 172 yards, and like you mentioned, a 30 longest was a reception. But he's definitely interesting because we'll talk about another Bucks player as we get on this podcast. But no, I think that's a good pick for surprise player. Fantasy surprise player for me is actually somebody on my team, Jordan Howard. And of course, who knew? Because obviously I didn't. He was on my bench. 29.5 points. He's currently has 4 touchdowns, which is tied for 4th in the running backs in the NFL this year. But what's interesting here is he hasn't really played or shown you why you should be starting him. Unless when it's your turn, Randy, if you can disagree, maybe I'm missing something here. But I just don't see Howard as the starter. We all remember last year in Chicago, started off great. Who came into the fold? Tariq Cohen. And where did Howard go? Obviously not good enough to make the team, and he was shipped to Philadelphia. And what's interesting too is you always look at projections, right? And you're trying to think, okay, more projections means there's a better probability they're going to do well. He was 7 times his projection in week 4. His previous weeks, he had 5 points, 2 points, 9 points. Why would you play him? Nope, he gets 29 points. Excuse me. He's up against the Jets this week, so hopefully you should see a repeat, and maybe he can slowly become a running back I can trust. And I looked at some of the last stuff here. He had almost 100 yards that game. He had 200-yard games the entire season last year. So this type of production is really not known to Howard. I'm hoping that Philly uses him more on the goal line drives there, like they did. But really, just a surprise factor because I thought for sure Howard was not really going to be a good player for me or anybody this year.
Well, certainly it didn't start out that way for the season. Like, I'm just looking at his stats here briefly. Yardage-wise, up until this last game, like you said, he had 80. This last game he had 87 rushing yards. His 3 games before that was 44, 18, and 37. So it's like, well, he's not getting you very much. And his rushes weren't, well, they are slowly climbing. Started with 6 in week 1, 8 in week 2, 11 in week 3, and 15 in week 4. The good news is that trend is heading in the right direction for you. If he keeps up with the 15 rushes a game, he has a good chance to be at least in the conversation. Now, as far as whether you start him or not, that might depend, first of all, on whether you believe after the 3 weeks that trend was going to continue to go up. It also might depend on who your other running backs are. And where you've got him in this week as the flex would be just about the only place you'd expect him to go because Derrick Henry is running pretty well for you this year. He has taken over the starting job in Tennessee. And Todd Gurley, we've talked about him being a disappointment some weeks, but he's still supposed to be the workhorse in LA. So, Howard is still your third best running back. Certainly, if he's improving and continues to at least, like I said, get 15 rushes a game, he might be someone who you can solidly put in there during the bye weeks of your other starters or to plug in for injury or to wait for a good matchup and play him at the flex. He's certainly worth keeping an eye on, at least at this point, but it's the same kind of thing. If this is just a one-time thing, you'll see not only his yards and touchdowns go down, but you'll see his rushes go down too. If his rushes go down, then you can assume that it was just a one-time thing this last week.
Yeah, and that's why I think I'm going to give him a nod here. But just from a surprise factor, it kind of, I really didn't anticipate that. So I'll just kick into the fantasy highlight player of the week. For me, I know, I believe we mentioned off air, you talked about him last week, but I got to give him another shout out. Jameis Winston for Old Dirty Bastards. This kid is absolutely on fire. We just touched base on what the Bucs are doing lately in the NFL. Winston had 37 fantasy points, which means he led all fantasy players. 4 touchdowns, 1 interceptions on 385 yards against the Rams defense. He dropped 55 points on them. And just a quick note here, it's even more impressive because the Rams defense has allowed the 7th fewest points to a fantasy quarterback, and let alone Jameis Winston getting those points. The last 2 games he's been over 30 points, so drastic increase, so Jake's got to be happy about that. He's averaged 8 yards an attempt over his past 8 games, which puts him tied for second. And he's had really... Yeah, like he's been a really good fantasy player lately, and it's a good spot for Jake. I know we talked about the trade where Jake moved a piece to get Winston, and we were kind of wondering, I don't know about that. And I know Ryan offered him Matt Ryan, which was turned down. And I think, Matt Ryan's still a good quarterback, but I think there's something going on in Tampa Bay right now. And I know Clueless Allen, he mentioned something at the beginning of the season is, hey, look what Bruce Arians will do to a quarterback. And I think it's starting to come through here. And also this week, another great matchup. He's playing the Saints, and they give up the 3rd most fantasy points. So if you can get 37 on the 7th fewest, I'd be interested to see what he does against the Saints.
Yeah, or at least up until last week, they didn't give up a whole lot of points in general. But I get what you mean. Yeah, for sure. He there's nothing wrong with picking him twice in a week when he plays that well. Especially, especially with, and I'm going to get into this for my highlight pick. Probably going to be a similar theme, and I know that I mentioned this in my rankings is the poor quarterback play in general. So when you have a quarterback that plays well when everyone else plays poorly, that's a real bonus, and that's going to segue into my fantasy highlight, which is Lamar Jackson, the quarterback for Clueless, and he was the second best quarterback this week behind Jameis Winston. Three touchdown passes, 247 yards, 66 rushing yards. Not doing too much with the rushing. Still shows he can throw it. I'm very happy about. I'm very happy to see that because we hadn't talked about it too much, but I've mentioned many times over the years about running quarterbacks and don't uh, don't don't try to force it too much, and then also rookie quarterbacks too. But again, because the other quarterbacks were so terrible, like I mentioned that I think it was about half of the quarterbacks in the league, or more than half of them, in our fantasy league at least, didn't reach their projections. Well, here's another stat: only 7 quarterbacks out of the 12 starters that we have scored over 20 points, and only 2 of them over 30, and these are the 2 that we're talking about. And here's a list of some of the quarterbacks who did not reach 20 points: Mahomes, Wilson, Ryan, Watson, Prescott, Brady, Cousins. These are some pretty big name guys, and they're all starters on any fantasy team, and their GMs were cursing them all week. So anytime that you have any quarterback that gets you 30 points on a week like that, that is definitely a fantasy highlight, and I got no problem giving it, even though Jackson, it's not that spectacular of a week when you compare it to the others. And I know we've seen 45-point games from quarterbacks before, but you know what? A week like this, 30 points is a highlight for me.
Yeah, no, Jackson is doing something too. I mean, Baltimore did not look good against Cleveland. Trust me, I had their defense, and I thought Baltimore would do way better against Cleveland. But I mean, he's doing what he needs to do. I mean, yeah, he threw 2 picks, but you balance that off with 3 touchdowns, and fantasy-wise, that makes a big difference. That's a lot of points right away. So, yeah, no, Jackson is a good quarterback, and I like, again, like you mentioned, I like to see that he's using the arm, not just the legs. So we got one more to go. Unfortunately, this is the bad news part. Who'd you have for bust of the week?
Well, my bust is Greg Olsen, tight end for the Panthers, and he was starting for the Bears this week. Um, I wasn't too disappointed because I was playing the Bears, and I got a real gift from Corey. So, and this Greg Olsen was certainly part of that gift. 5 yards. That's it. Not much to talk about as far as that. But even with this terrible game, his average for the season is 55 yards. So if he got his average going into this game was probably more like 60 yards or 70 yards, which even without a touchdown is still pretty good for tight ends. He's not quite the premier tight end that he was a couple years ago, but like I said, he's still supposed to be better than average. And only 5 yards out of that, really, we can pick up your boy Jack Doyle there, and he can surely get to 5 yards.
That's a good reference. Yeah, no, yeah, and again, we talked about that last week. I think was if you can get a touchdown out of your tight end, you're already ahead of the game. When they don't do that, their yards usually don't equate to a good week. And when you're getting only 5 yards or whatever you mentioned, yeah, it's got to be tough because you're just hoping the other tight end across from you doesn't do anything. So, yeah, no, I can see that. Something's going on in Carolina. Maybe that scarf is tied too tight and maybe Newton handed out too many to the team. I don't know. But you're not going to like my bust of the week. I can tell you that right now because he's on your team. Adam Thielen. Adam Thielen. This boy is upset. He publicly basically called out Cousins to say, hey, okay, let's get going here. Quick before I continue, Diggs says the trade rumors are not entirely false. those are two good wide receivers that are upset with 84 million guaranteed. Something is going on there that they are not using, and Thielen has had enough. Point 0.6 points. Now I know, Randy, you're quite invested in Minnesota, and of course, Dalvin Cook did good things for you and has been doing good things. But Thielen is a keeper. He's a starting wide receiver on any fantasy team in any league. Like you mentioned, I think a couple episodes ago, they're supposed to get you points. That's why you're starting them. That's why you've kept them. When that
Right.
happens, things can go south. Now, mind you, you did get blessed with a matchup here, but in another week, that could have really hurt you. Um,
Mm-hmm.
4 weeks we're into the season. Only once he's gone over his projected points. And from week 3 to week 8, currently, Thielen will have gone up. He will be going up against four defenses who are all inside the top 10 who give up the most points to fantasy wide receivers. So, just an interesting stretch coming up that I wanted to point out, because if things are bad now, they better get good against bad defenses.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll see. And like I have a note here, it says, I think this, even though Randy won, it kind of brought him back down to reality because you have been on such a tear with Minnesota.
Mm-hmm.
Now I'm curious to see, because this is so public, is Cousins just dumb enough to try to force balls to him? Now he's going to get double teamed because defenses are saying, hey, this guy wants the ball. They're probably going to get him involved. Is that going to affect his production at all? I don't know. But upsetting week for Thielen for sure.
Oh, for sure, yeah. And it's the kind of thing I'm like checking the schedule to see when the Vikings play the Bears again because I'm going to give some serious considerations to who do I start. And even Delvin Cook, like if he doesn't get that fourth quarter touchdown, then he's got a disappointing week. And like I said, then I might even be giving my gift back to Corey, and then that could have been like a 30 to 50 kind of game in fantasy, which is real disappointing. But yeah, for sure, that is something that I definitely got away with one there. With Thielen not playing well, there were a few other players on my roster that didn't play well as well. As like a couple of garbage time touchdowns really saved me that week.
Exactly. So, but that's the highlight, surprise, bust of week 4. No new news segment. So again, we're going to continue the pattern of breaking down one of the teams in our divisions. So I believe I went first last episode. So Randy, who are you breaking down in the AFC?
Well, I'm gonna break down. Shelley told me to this week. He's 3-1 record. One of those wins, I mean, was against myself. Was a real close one. Uh, he's got a couple stars on this team. Russell Wilson, who I believe I mentioned as a highlight last week, putting up points even in the fourth quarter. He's got himself 2 touchdowns in the Thursday night game that we are watching just right now. He gets the points whether his team wins or losses. He always seems to um, always seems to be involved in the touchdowns, whether it's rushing or throwing. It's not like Carson really vultures a lot of touchdowns from him, so that's always good to see. And obviously the big star here, young guy, and I know you and I both like this kid, Nick Chubb. Man, is he
I
ever
know.
carrying the load? And he's just carrying, like, man, he's just on fire. He's just a good old running back. Really love his game. Hope he doesn't get hurt, even though he's not on my team. We're all kind of cheering for him to kind of really take off because we remember watching him in college. He was a good guy back then. Um, the third real star I have, and I know no one likes to talk about kickers, but Justin Tucker really is a good kicker. And you mentioned the Ravens offense. Anytime an offense plays really well, gets lots of yards, gets lots of touchdowns, lots of points, the kicker always benefits from that, and he's a good kicker to boot. Pun not intended on that one. He's got 3 players as well that are good and have the potential to be really good stars. Julio Jones, who normally would be in the star category, he's got a monstrously high ceiling, but he's got a really low floor. And we've talked about this over the last couple of years many times on the podcast about how he can be a bust one week and a star the next. I talked about Chris Godwin earlier. He's been great lately. Will it be sustainable? Well, we'll see. But you know what? He's riding high now. And he's got another good young running back, Josh Jacobs, who didn't even start for him last week. He's basically just a good running back on a bad team, but you know he's a starter and he's carrying lots of balls for the Raiders there. So hey, that's a good option to have on the bench to bring up anytime a good matchup comes your way. Some of the bad aspects to his team doesn't really have a good tight end at all. I mean, you know, Vance McDonald's injured and yeah, he doesn't have a real good tight end. Let's just put it that way. I did notice too. He seems to love that questionable tag. There are 5 players on his roster that are currently have the questionable tag. So I guess one problem would be if some of these injuries don't get sorted out, is he going to be watching like every Sunday morning pregame show to see who's in the lineup or not? Because man, that's like you certainly everybody hates that questionable tag, and you certainly want some clarity on Sunday morning.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
But overall, this is a really long list of players that he's got. So he's really dangerous in this division. I mean, week 1 was a terrible start, but he averages 122 points from week 2 to week 4. So, hey, he's a dangerous team in this division.
Yeah, no, he's currently playing Texas Walker right now and has a commanding lead. I mean, Russell Wilson is doing good things right now. And yes, to the Chubb comment, I love that kid. Been a fan of his since college. I think he's going to do great in Cleveland. I hope Freddie Kitchens doesn't screw him over when Kareem Hunt comes back. And Selby, I know if you're listening, I've tried to trade you for Chubb 8 million times. Tell me what you want because I'm getting frustrated. I have beyond tried to trade for Chubb, and like you said, Randy, the value is just so good in that kid, and there's good things there. And you know what, Selby, he's had some rough years, and he's got a good team this year, so who knows? So we'll see where he ends up. For the NFC, I'll be breaking down his opponent this week, Texas Walker Rangers, aka last year's champ. Interesting start to the season. He's currently 1-3, ninth overall, averaging 95 points a week. Only one win, which was in week 2, where he actually doubled up on Old Dirty Bastards. So he lost week 1 to Kelly, who's currently 2nd. He lost week 3 to Corey, who's currently 6th. And he lost week 4 last week to Nigel by 0.98 points. I feel for him. That was close because Juju was playing on the Monday Nighter and just could not get over that hump. But that's kind of how we got to where he is. Some of the highlights. In what world would you think, and I know you love him, that Dak Prescott would have more fantasy points than Aaron Rodgers? So to me, the highlight is Dak Prescott. He's got 110 points, and Rodgers is his backup, which is just weird. It's just weird to say that Aaron Rodgers is your backup. He's played bad teams early. I know I joked, on our Facebook page about you and your Cowboys, which could have inflated his points. But at the end of the day, points are points, and that's what you want from your quarterback. Besides New Orleans game last week, he's had nothing but more than 27 fantasy points. 27 was the low, and 41 was the high. So great numbers for a quarterback through 4 weeks of the season here. And Dallas will have some good matchups moving forward, so we'll see how he fares. Obviously, this kid's obviously Cody's best player is Christian McCaffrey. This dude's a killer. 86 points so far from the run game. Since last year, week 14, he's actually also had 63 receptions, which is most in the NFL for the running backs. And he's getting you at least a solid 20 points a week, right? You do the math. It's at least 20 points a week. So, I wouldn't be worried about McCaffrey, and he can actually do some scary things. The low light to the flip side of McCaffrey, his running back depth is terrible. Peyton Barber and Matt Breida are his only other running backs, which are also in starting positions. They only have 57 points combined between the two of them, and only 2 touchdowns out of that 57 points come from only Barber. Breida doesn't have any, so he definitely needs help in this position. Juju, Obviously, we're learning that maybe Antonio Brown did good things for Juju. Obviously, created some double coverage away to allow him some isolation plays, and is not getting the production that one would hope. I mean, you got a guy like Cortland Sutton. He's a rookie who's getting more points in Denver than Juju is in Pittsburgh. Now, yes, Ben is hurt, we all know, but Mason Rudolph is not a bad quarterback. So Juju should be getting more than what he is. I mean, like Demarcus Robinson from Kansas City has more points than Juju. Like it's just there's some scenarios on Cody's teams where his wide receivers are not getting any love. And unfortunately, I will also touch on the tight end position. Eric Ebram, with no Andrew Luck, it's just not going to be a great year, I don't think, for that position. So could use some help there as well. Things to look forward to. Just seeing if maybe those wide receivers can wake up a bit more, especially Cooks in the Rams. I had Cooks last year, and the Rams were just on fire. I know you had a couple receivers last year too. I think you have one currently, or maybe I'm wrong. But the Rams are just doing nothing, and Cooks is a great wide receiver. And when you go week in and week out where you're not even getting touches, it's again frustrating. So I think his wide receivers need to wake up, or he's going to be in a little bit of trouble here, especially in the division he's currently in. We'll see where this goes. I think Cody could potentially make playoffs if some of these players wake up, but he definitely needs to look at obtaining more running backs for his depth.
Exactly, and maybe if he takes one of his three quarterbacks that he's got and maybe flips them for some upgrade somewhere else. Like you had mentioned, Aaron Rodgers sitting on the bench. I'm sure there's more than a few guys that would trade him half their lineup for Aaron Rodgers.
I'm sure they would. Yeah. So, we'll see what happens with those guys. But that kind of breaks down another couple teams in our league. If nothing is too crazy next week, stay tuned. Maybe your team's going to be announced. Looks like we have two more trades, Randy, since last week. So let's just quickly touch on those. So we'll go back to the earliest trade. Global Warming is receiving Stephon Diggs and an 8th round pick from Misfits, and Misfits receives DJ Clark Jr. and a 5th round. I know Ryan was having issues with the wide receiver depth, so it looks like a trade-off for each other. And Nigel, actually, if you had the ability to get rid of Diggs, you've picked up a 5th round pick, and I think I really don't see anything wrong with this trade because DJ Chark, sorry, I think I said Clark, Chark, hey, Jacksonville, like that Gardner Minshew, he's throwing balls, man, and Chark's getting a few looks, so to gain 3 extra rounds, I kind of like this trade for Nigel myself. What do you think?
Especially since I believe Nigel earlier in the year gave up a draft pick to get Hawkinson, so this might be kind of to replace that one as well. So yeah, he fills a hole that he had in the draft. They flip wide receivers, like you said. Both Diggs has been struggling, and Chark has been at least has more potential than you would have expected. So yeah, this has the potential certainly to benefit both guys. Nothing wrong with a trade like that.
No, and then the last one was Clueless received Devin Singletary and a 7th round pick from the Connor Roll, and the Connor Roll only received a 5th round pick from Clueless. I think Clueless obviously needed some running back depth. Connor Roll, I don't know who he dropped. Maybe he can chime in on the Facebook page, but obviously odd trades you're going to have to either acquire. Maybe that was an IR position he got rid of. So it's always good to, if you don't need a player, to gain a pick or move up a few rounds. So if you needed him, Clueless, great. A 5th round pick is not the end of the world, and for the Connor role, it's another position to add depth next year for sure.
Yeah, and this is certainly not a Singletary is limited in practice according to the Yahoo site here, but Buffalo has their bye in week 6, so there's a good chance he might not play or play limited, and then take the bye week off and come back, and they get Miami right away. So you know what? Maybe this is the kind of thing where he's expecting him to be healthy for Miami. Maybe there's a good matchup coming there. Just kind of looking down, I guess Buffalo still gets Miami twice this year. Plus, I see Washington in there as well. So definitely has the potential to be, a matchup, uh, uh, a positive matchup as far as running backs going forward. Like you said, adding depth. They only flipped uh, draft picks from a couple of rounds, so not a huge flip as far as that goes. Although it does improve for the Connor roles, it definitely improves his draft position a little bit. Yeah. There's positives on both sides here. Nothing too blockbuster, but you know what? It's positive.
Well, and at the end of the day, it's another trade. So
Yeah,
obviously, this league is super active this year, and I think guys are realizing the how good draft pick trading can actually influence the trades. So, it's
yeah,
good to see. And we'll go from there. But that kind of does that. We have a big week in week 5. There should be some really good matchups. I'm hoping that my team bounces back. Sorry, buddy, but I need a bounce back like no other because it has been rough. And I know you don't want that because you're on a roll and you need to get back on and get going. So it'll be a good one. It should be a good matchup. And good luck to everybody this weekend. And yeah, just enjoy the football.
yeah. I just want to add one little quick thing for anyone who listens to the podcast to kind of think about. Brian and I have been lightly tossing around the idea that one thing this league needs is a trophy for the winner. Uh, so we haven't done much research into that, but just thought I'd float that idea out so that guys can start thinking about where they stand on it and what their opinion might be on getting a trophy and what they might look for, and whether we can get one reasonably cheap or whether you want to splurge and get a decent one or what that might look like. So, anyways, just kind of thought I'd throw that out there so the GMs can kind of get that idea in their head. Maybe we can start a conversation on it soon, league-wide conversation on it.
Excellent work. No, I look forward to that and seeing what everybody has to say. So again, thanks for tuning in, guys. We can't do this if you don't listen, and maybe you're not listening, but we don't care. So have a good week,
Yeah.
and we'll talk to you guys next week.
See you, boys.